Internal alchemy. So today we're going to talk about internal alchemy, or Neidan, on the channel here. This is Qigong Project. I'm Robert Coons. I've been practicing internal alchemy since about 2011. My teacher's name is Haiyang. You can check out his channel here on YouTube, Haiyang channel, where he gives talks about internal martial arts and Taoist practice, internal alchemy, etc. His teachers were Cao Zhenyang of the White Cloud Temple. He also studied with Hu Haiya, who was a major internal alchemy figure in the 20th century, and various other people too. So if you're interested about the background of where my practice comes from, where his practice comes from, then you can check out his channel. But today I'm just going to give an introduction to what internal alchemy is and the basic goals and aspirations of people who practice this style, as well as perhaps a little bit about the relationship between internal alchemy and Qigong. So last week we talked about Yangsheng. You remember? So Yangsheng is basically one of the traditional names for Qigong practice. It can include various different types of energetic skills, circulating qi and moving the blood and fluids in the body and stretching and so on and so forth. There's also a dimension of Yangsheng that's associated with dietary medicine, lifestyle, and so on. Neidan is a different thing. So internal alchemy is a type of meditation where we use apophatic meditations, so meditation in stillness, to generate internal energy inside of the body and be able to cause it to move from place to place, to heal the body and return it back to sort of its original condition that maybe we had when our bodies were younger, before we started to get chronic diseases and stuff like that. And then over time, we can use this practice to develop spiritual awareness that goes beyond the body. And then the greatest goal of internal alchemy is to harmonize the void spirit nature with the Tao itself. So that's the basic idea of internal alchemy. It's a meditation system we use to generate qi. The qi becomes spirit, and then the spirit eventually enters into emptiness and is able to commune with the Tao, which, according to Taoist philosophy, is the original creator of all things. So internal alchemy as a style of meditation, there's several different branches, and each of the branches has a slightly different way of approaching the goals of internal alchemy practice. We'll talk in more detail about the branches in a future video. I mainly practice the middle school style of internal alchemy, but there are multiple branches and it's worth knowing a little bit about all of them. The main idea of internal alchemy is that within our bodies, we have a little bit of inherent leftover qi that was created at conception. Actually, it's a kind of essence that was created during our conception. So when our father's sperm and our mother's egg came together at conception, then the original physical material that was created was a little ball of innate, essential life energy. And so that ball developed and matured over time, and it started to give off an innate kind of qi, which helped to form the body and helped to create the motion within the body. And then eventually, by about the third trimester, when our nervous systems became complete and we were ready to be born, then our innate spirit, right, our innate awareness was generated. And then after that, we're a fully formed little human being and we're born into the world, and then we have our lives. So the internal alchemy school, and Taoism more broadly, sees that generative moment at the beginning as being a small version of the work of the Tao in the universe. So if you watched any of my Tao Te Ching videos up to this point, you'll have seen that originally the Tao is suspended in non-being, absolute non-being, and it generates being and non-being together, and yin and yang together. And then those things interact and they form the world and they form the potential for life. And then the life potential forms human beings. So internal alchemy looks at this theory from the perspective of a human life. And it says, okay, well, human life must therefore be based on the same energy as the Tao. It's sort of looking at things in a similar way to the idea that the Big Bang creates the universe and it leaves behind this energetic signature that slowly slows down over time. And eventually, it leads into entropy. And then when things become too slow and too spaced out, then the universe gets pulled apart. Well, the internal alchemy or Taoist view of it is that when conception happens, or when the Tao generates the universe, right, both of these different features are placed together, ultimately that's this really huge energetic event, and then gradually it takes a form and it develops into the potential for life and then a living thing, and the living thing lives in the world, but gradually its body gets injured and becomes slower, and in a sense it suffers from entropy, and then by the end of its life it's really stiff and brittle, and then it dies, right? So what the internal alchemy practitioners thought was that you might be able to turn that process around, and by achieving the absolute void and absolute emptiness of the Tao, then in a way you could go back to the Tao, borrow some of its energy, and be reborn energetically while you're still alive in your current body. And so what they did was they would find a special way to meditate in deep silence, often while focusing on the lower abdomen, what we call the lower dantian, or the burner, right? They would focus on that area while meditating and adjusting the breath, and enter into a profound state of inner peace and calm, and in the West, what we call apophasis, so self-negation or self-forgetting, forgetting the body, forgetting the mind, and everything. And then ultimately that would result in a little bit of positive energy, a little bit of yang energy being developed in the body, being able to move, and causing a whole string of effects that would ultimately result in the body being completely suffused with this energy. So that's the sort of the basis of Neidan. That's the axiomatic core of Neidan. It's this idea that, okay, we're practicing something where we imitate what the Tao does. And if we imitate what the Tao does, then eventually we can cause ourselves to become spiritually realized people. The spiritual realization of Neidan actually is not different from the spiritual realization of Buddhism. They're both looking at things from the perspective of revealing the innate nature of our consciousness, or the innate nature of our awareness, and staying within that. The Taoists talk especially about Qing Jing Wu Wei. So Qing means clear, Jing means still, Wu means no, and Wei means action. So clarity, stillness, and non-action is how we realize the spirit in Neidan practice. But unlike, let's say, Zen Buddhism, where mostly people only meditate on emptiness, in Neidan we're actually trying to use this meditation technique to generate an energetic change in the body. Now, according to the traditions of Taoism, they say that first we cultivate this little bit of essence that's left over from conception that happens to be located, in our kidneys or in our lower abdomen, that area generally, and transform it into qi. Then that qi moves up the back of the body to the brain. It stays in the brain for a period of time, and it repairs the brain. Then it's collected with the saliva, swallowed and brought back down to the abdomen, to be cultivated behind the belly button until it becomes bigger. Then eventually the qi can generate a path around the entire body, down the legs to the bottom of the foot, back up the foot, above the head, right, and all this kind of stuff, ultimately resulting in the deepest part of the body, the central channel, being connected from the perineum to the top of the head, and then eventually for that energy to be able to leave the body through the top of the head and be transformed into spiritual awareness first, and then when it's able to leave the body, to be able to integrate with the emptiness outside the body, ultimately leading to realization of the Tao. Now, I have to tell you, I haven't finished the whole process, so I think I have a reasonable level of practice in internal alchemy. Certainly, much more than a beginner. But I have to say that I haven't integrated with the Tao, so I can't tell you exactly what that means, since I don't want to talk outside of my own experience. But having said that, I do feel confident to share a little bit about this art, since I've been practicing it for a long time and have done many of the stages of practice. So we know now that internal alchemy, basically the view is you use the essence of the body to generate qi, which is, you can say it's like energy. You can say it's the movement, the internal movement feeling of, this energetic perception in the body. And then that generates a spiritual awareness, right? So that feeling of qi, it eventually attaches to our awareness, and it generates a kind of increased spiritual awareness, which can manifest in various different ways. in future videos, we might do a talk about the relationship of the pre-heaven and post-heaven, because a lot of these things are differentiated by whether they're relative to regular perception or whether they're relative to the deep meditation state. And those things really need to be differentiated to understand what the goals of internal alchemy are. But at least today we can talk about it in this basic sense and do a general introduction. So basically, we're able to generate spiritual perception, and then that spiritual perception can be emptied out. And we can realize the nature of the environments that we live in, including the natural transformation of qi in the environment relative to season, relative to time, and various other features. So that's broadly, in a nutshell, what internal alchemy is. Now, the question is, how do you practice it? Because there are a lot of divergent views about internal alchemy right now, especially in the West. In China, there are a lot of divergent views too, but there is a standard of practice in China. There's a standard traditional understanding of internal alchemy. In the West right now, many people broadly think that any time that you move qi without moving the body, then that's internal alchemy. But that's not quite correct. That's more in the domain of yang sheng, or visualization, maybe Taoist visualization practices or breathing practices or intention practices. Those things are all exclusively things that we do with the perception. But internal alchemy practice is done to a major extent in what's called the pre-heaven state, or the state of really profound meditation, where we essentially forget our thoughts, we forget our intention and our bodies, and then disappear into meditative nothingness. Generally, people will protect their attention somewhere in the body, whether it's in the lower abdomen or between the eyes or in the upper back. Right? There's a number of different ways we can do this relative to which school you study, but as a general rule, internal alchemy relies on this idea of protecting the mind somewhere in the body in order to forget the self. And so we modify the mind in some way with the breath, for instance, and then gradually that leads to a state of deep meditation where we forget our bodies, we forget our thoughts, and then this so-called pre-heaven state transpires. And from within the pre-heaven state, then there's an energetic transformation which causes this yang energy, this qi, to wake up in the body and to be able to move strongly of its own volition. And so, at least for the first stages of internal alchemy practice, the real way to master it is to go into a profound state of meditation where the body naturalizes and normalizes itself on its own accord, and then ultimately results in this transformative energetic movement or transformative energetic experience. Then after that, the next thing is that we have to collect the energy that's moved back into the body, usually into the abdomen area, to keep it there, and then meditate again so that it suffuses that area and gradually builds up. And so over time, this leads to the development of what's called jindan, or the golden elixir, or nedan, the internal elixir. The internal elixir essentially is the relationship between this pre-heaven generation of energy and the post-heaven experience of the energy moving and then bringing it back so it can rest in the pre-heaven. Some schools of thought, like Huang Yuanji, who's a major thinker of the middle school that I practice, they use the metaphor of a mother and child from the Tao Te Ching, right? The Tao Te Ching says if you want to understand the mother, then you have to look at the child, because the child will go back to protect the mother. It's the same kind of idea, right? This pre-heaven state where the energy is developed is the mother, and then it generates the child, which is the movement of energy that we can feel with our regular perception, and then bringing the energy back is how the child goes back to protect the mother. So the pre-heaven generates the post-heaven, and the post-heaven then returns back to protect the pre-heaven. And then ultimately they merge together and we enter back into deep meditation. So over time, that causes this development of positive energy, or yang qi, in the body to become stronger and stronger, so that it eventually fills up the entire core of the body and can eventually exist outside the body as well. That's really the basic concept of internal alchemy. If you understand that root concept of practice, then once you receive teachings about how to practice, it's relatively easy to proceed, as long as you don't forget that. What people tend to get caught up in is thinking that they can do some practice to increase their post-heaven perception of qi, or increase their regular perceptual idea of qi, and they can get some feeling, some warmth in their abdomen, or maybe some movement in their spine. but it stops there. It doesn't get any stronger than that. And so it doesn't ultimately serve the purpose of internal alchemy practice. It's what in Taoism they call pangmen, side doors, right? Rather than the front door. So if you want to do the front door of practice, then you have to learn how to practice Wu Wei, right? Non-action, right? Remember that from the Tao Te Ching? We haven't gotten there yet in our analysis of the Tao Te Ching on Qigong project, but I'm sure that you all know the idea of Wu Wei. And so if you can achieve Wu Wei properly, following the proper principles of internal alchemy, then you can achieve Wei Wu Wei, right? Acting without action. Acting without action is when the energy is generated, and then it can move. And then you have to also know a little bit about Yo Wei, right? Using action so that you can return the energy back to your body. But basically, that's how internal alchemy works. It's not like reverse breathing or visualizing the sun or doing something funny with your genitals, right? None of those things are internal alchemy. And actually, there's hundreds of classics of internal alchemy in the Taoist canon and outside of the Taoist canon, and the majority of them admonish us not to practice side door arts if we want to achieve the internal elixir. What we really want to do is get the principle right in the first place, and then we can achieve the internal elixir. It takes time, and it takes very serious practice and research. You have to have a subtle understanding of it. It's not something that you can understand through a mechanical view like Qigong or the martial arts, right? With Qigong or the martial arts, you can spend some time understanding it on a mechanical level until you get good at it, and then it becomes able to be controlled by your spirit and your mind. But internal alchemy, it doesn't have that. So from day one, we have to have a subtle understanding of the nature of rooting the mind in the body, being internally quiet, placid, and still, and achieving correct non-action. Then we can really generate the energy and start the process of building up this new awareness. Now, another question that might come to mind is, what is this qi? What is this spirit, right? That sounds kind of far out. So here's the thing. People in the ancient world often did philosophy as a kind of observational view of the world, right? So people would experience certain things in their lives, and then they would talk about them observationally. And that led to the rise of sciences, which were empirical in nature, right? They relied on observation of phenomena in order to justify their scientific doctrine. And internal alchemy is quite similar. People perceived this sensation in the body, energetic, positive feeling sensation that would move up the back, into the brain, down the front of the body with the saliva, and they used cultural ideas to define it, like qi, for instance, right, which is a very old Chinese cultural idea, which greatly predates Taoism. But they would use these ideas and they would describe it as such. But nobody ever thought about the physiological function of those things beyond the already present cultural concepts that were available at the time. So as an example, Jing, or essence, in its post-heaven state, is said to be the semen of the father and the blood of the mother. Because people, they didn't have microscopes at that time, so they couldn't look and find, sperm and eggs in the semen and the blood, right? And then on another level, they would say, well, it's pretty clear that when you have these energetic phenomena happen to you, they're not directly related to sexual essence. It must be another kind of essence. So they said there's a very subtle kind of essence that's hidden deeply in the body, and that's the real essence that we're working with. So they called that Yuan Jing, or original essence, which again is Chinese medicine idea that predates Taoism. But ultimately, these ideas are very good heuristic models to explain the practice. So a heuristic is when you make an explanation of something that's simple enough to get it right, but maybe it doesn't explain it in perfect detail. But it doesn't explain what happens in perfect detail. So the question is then, what is it that produces these sensations in the body? Because many thousands, if not millions, of people have experienced them. Enough time, the experiment has been replicated successfully enough times that we know that from our own experience anyway, and the experience of our friends who also practice, that it's not fake. It's not a sort of a pseudoscience hypothesis. It's something real. But the problem is that we don't know for sure what the physiological mechanism that generates these sensations are. And people have tried to define qi in various different ways according to modern scientific research, but there's so many different types of sensation that you could call qi, and the ones in Neidan are very, very specific. in conversations with my teacher, I hope he won't mind my saying this, but in conversations with my teacher in the past, he's mentioned to me that he thinks that it might be a hormonal thing. It could be that, meditating on these certain parts of the body cause certain, hormones to become more active and generate a certain kind of effect. The internal alchemy thinker Jiang Weiqiao, whose book is called Yin Shi Zi Jing Zuo Lun, so Master Yin Shi discusses quiet meditation, who wrote his book in 1914, he believed that there was a deep relationship between the nervous system, especially the parasympathetic nervous system, so the rest and repose nervous system, and also the metabolism of the body, which somehow produced these energetic sensations. So there's a number of different views out there, but I'm not sure anybody has done complete biomedical research about it to find out what really is the mechanism. So we can't say exactly what these things are from a biomedical perspective. We can speculate, and we can also come to the conclusion that these things are replicable in our own practice. And according to each practice, we should follow it in its right way, and then we're more likely to experience the benefit of the practice. So if you practice Qigong, for instance, then you should follow it according to the principles of Qigong. So you use the mind and the movement of the body and the breath to generate sensations of qi in the body, which then can be led around and placed in certain places for healing. But if you practice internal alchemy, then you should follow the principle of converting emptiness into being, which is the essential principle of Taoism. So internal alchemy is actually one of the purest iterations of correct Taoist philosophy in practice. The people who created it really profoundly understood books like the Tao Te Ching, the Yin Fu Jing, and various other Taoist texts that deal with these essential cosmological or cosmogonic problems that inform human existence. And so then another question might be, how do you practice internal alchemy? There are a number of different ways to practice, but the most common one is that you would sit quietly in a peaceful place, close your eyes, make sure your body is basically upright and relaxed. Place your hands comfortably in your lap and adjust your breath so that both your inhalation and exhalation are silent and smooth, slender and continuous. Then allow your breath to fill your lower abdomen on the inhalation, allowing it to expand downward and outward. Then on the exhalation, allow your lower abdomen to relax downward. And as you do that, you can use your attention to observe deeply into your lower abdomen, especially on the exhalation, as if you're looking into a profoundly deep and dark place, becoming calmer and deeper and more placid and at peace. And over time, as you do this, then your mind will be able to root into your lower abdomen where this original essence material is located, and gradually it will mix with it and temper it, and you'll be able to enter into a deep state of meditation and gradually forget your body and forget your mind and your thoughts, and enter the pre-heaven state. Now, this kind of practice takes a long time to develop. Most people require at least 100 days of consistent practice to be able to really properly get the foundation of that idea. But over time, it will start to give you rewards. When you meditate, you'll feel better, you feel more comfortable and refreshed. And then eventually the qi will wake up and it can move in your body. There are other, more subtle details of that practice, of course, but it's a good way to get started. And there's other ways to get started too, which I might introduce in later videos. But I hope you thought that this introduction to internal alchemy was helpful. I will put a few links, like a link to my blog, Immortality Study, a link to the Qigong Project website, and a link to some online courses that I've been teaching as well, if you're interested, about the internal alchemy school. And hopefully you got something from this. And if you have any questions, then feel free to ask them in the comments section. And, as all YouTubers say, make sure you press like and subscribe for more fresh videos in your inbox every week. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I'm Robert Kuhn's QigongProject.blog.
We'll see you in the next one.